welcome to the School of Speech podcast, presented by SpeechTherapyPD.com. School of Speech is designed specifically for the school-based SLP to come together to discuss current topics, tackle difficult situations, and share our insights. Our goal is to bolster confidence, celebrate our triumphs, and foster a community dedicated to the excellence in the school setting. Hello, everyone. My name is Carolyn Dolby, and I am your Speech Therapy PD podcast host for School of Speech. School of Speech is designed for the school-based SLP to come together. We're going to explore current trends, share insights, and champion our expertise. Our goal is to bolster confidence, celebrate our triumphs, and really foster that community dedicated to the excellence in the school setting. Super excited for today's episode, Transformative Strategies for Neurodiversity Affirming IEPs. Chris Wenger will be taking us on this journey where we will explore key strategies that are going to help us shift towards neuroaffirming IEPs. We hope that you leave today equipped with practical strategies to create inclusive and effective IEPs that honor each autistic student's unique strengths and needs. Our aim is to provide all of us, speech pathologists, school-based clinicians, with the tools to foster supporting and empowering learning environments to ensure that students thrive in their educational journeys. A little housekeeping, I'm going to go through our disclosures. Chris receives a salary as the lead SLP at Chaffee Union High School. He also receives compensation from Boom Learning, Teachers Pay Teachers, the Dynamic Assessment of Social Emotional Learning, and the Neurodiversity Affirming Activity Book. Chris is also receiving an honorarium from Speech Therapy PD for his participation today. For me, I receive a salary as the district level dysphagia support clinician for Cy-Fair Independent School District. I'm compensated for my graduate courses I teach at the University of Houston, and I'm a consultant for school districts across the nation supporting their program development and staff training. I also receive compensation from SpeechTherapyPD.com to host this podcast. Non-disclosure, I am a member of the TSHA, which is the Texas Speech and Hearing Feeding and Swallowing Task Force. I volunteer for Feeding Matters, and I'm a member of ASHA's Special Interest Groups 13, Swallowing and Swallowing Disorders, as well as SIG 16, School-Based Issues. So excited to have Chris Wenger with us because he is an enthusiastic school-based SLP. He's the creator of the Dynamic Assessment of Social Emotional Learning, and and the Neurodiversity Affirming Activity Book. He is internationally acclaimed presenter who loves to share the most current trends with our older autistic students. He's a prominent thought leader in the field of speech pathology, and he's really known on his social media as the Speech Dude. If you have not looked at Speech Dude up, I feel sorry for you. After this podcast, you go right to social media, you go to Speech Dude. He's amazing. Chris motivates and he entertains fellow educators and clinicians through his humorous and inspiring posts and videos. Welcome, Chris. Yay!
Hey, thank you so much for having me. That was an amazing introduction. I need to bring you out here to Los Angeles so when I go to work, you can introduce me to my colleagues because they have no clue what I do.
I would love it. Before you come, I'll pave the way. That would be hilarious. I love it.
That would be great. It's so funny because working in the schools, as a speech pathologist, there are so many people within the campus in different roles. A lot of times they have no clue what the speech therapist does. They're just like, hey, you're still here at this school and you're subbing, right? I'm like, no, I'm not a substitute. I'm the speech therapist here on campus. But it's fun
That is
because
a
we'll kind
sad
of dive
truth.
into it is the sad truth. But I like to get out there and to connect and really, and we'll talk about that as we go through the show, but getting all stakeholders on board. So that way we're all coming in and helping our students with disabilities and how we can best meet their needs.
Right on. Do you want to get the party started by telling us a little bit about your background and your journey? How you got here, Chris?
Yeah, how did I get here? Right here. Yeah, it has been regarding my educational journey. I came from a background of parents who were in education. My mom was on the administrative side. My dad was a PE teacher and adaptive PE teacher. So, my upbringing had been from my dad always saying, hey, the person that wins the race is the one who helps others. And that will always be, the way to live your life, serving others, helping others, doing the best you can, help those who need the most help, and life will be great. So he kind of persuaded me to get into working in special education. So after high school, I went and got a master's degree in mild moderate disabilities and was a teacher for a couple of years. And so that really was a great foundation for me at the beginning because I worked with more students in a classroom. I had like 22 students squeezed in this small little classroom, and I got familiar with writing IEPs. So I was able to get that perspective of what it was like from the teacher's end. And then at some of those meetings, the speech therapist would show up, as one of the providers, and the parents every time were so appreciative to this guy. They were like, hey, you know what? We are just so thankful that you're helping our child communicate and make friends and, do better with their speech and language development. And that went positive. Then they would turn to me and say, okay, about giving my child a D, I have some things that I want to speak to you about, sir. And I was like, I don't like this role. I want to switch to the speech role. No, I joke around, but I really did want to work with smaller groups to make an impact on how I can bring students together to connect and foster genuine relationships and authentic connections, as well as, helping build those language skills that were necessary. So I went back to school, and then the rest is history. I haven't looked back on it once. I always knew that if I stepped forward to get into the role of being an SLP, and if it didn't work out, I could always fall back on getting back into the classroom with my teaching credential. But you know what? Everything has just been such a great experience from all angles. I worked in private practice as a supervisor at a pediatric clinic. I was on the board for California for our Speech and Hearing Association.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is really cool because I was the director for the largest county in the state. Actually, it's the largest county in the nation, San Bernardino County. So it was San Bernardino and Riverside counties. But that's at the board meetings, I had established connections with other individuals that were all about advocating for our field. And one of them was a director from Los Angeles. So I lived in a different, and she is now my fiance, and we have several children together. So that's why I met her. I met her at over the course of being at board meetings at the state level. And so now that's our pillow talk. Like at night,
I love it.
before I go to bed, I'm like, hey, I have a question. So I have this parent that was concerned with their child's speech and blah, blah, blah. And so, yeah, our life is just all about speech therapy.
That is so cool. We're so
it's really cool.
started as a teacher too, and I really love I was a kindergarten teacher. Everything you learned in kindergarten. It really gave me a great foundation. So I hear you. I love where you come from, what you're doing. You've kind of done it all. So this is awesome. I know we're going to be talking about neurodiversity affirming. Do you mind just doing maybe a little overview for us listening to better understand what neurodiversity is?
Yeah, I mean, Gosh, I could say I'll share in a few different ways, just even
Yeah.
breaking down those terms
Yeah.
with the word neuro, because this is kind of how I describe it to my students.
Okay.
Neuro meaning brain, and then diversity meaning, differences. And so if we really come at it by looking at, okay, so everybody in the world has differences with the way we experience the world. The majority of the world communicates in a certain way and experiences their sensory needs in a certain way. But there are also other groups who might have a different way of communicating, a different way of experiencing sensory needs. And that's important because we want to make sure that everybody's feeling heard and being seen, while we're not excluding others. And so there's been a really big shift, in more recent years about getting away from the fix it approach, which was used to be viewing, different neurotypes as either being broken or that they needed to be fixed. So what ended up happening over the years was there was a big push of saying, hey, you can't be who you are. We need to change who you are. So that way you can imitate or blend in with your peers. And that just has only led to a lot more anxiety and mental health challenges. And so neurodiversity at the core is understanding that the world is made up of different brain types. I always think I have an activity book that I recently released, and we talk about neurodiversity in that book as a way of it being like a garden with different types of flowers and different types of, just a variety of the garden that makes the collection. And that's what makes the garden beautiful, is that there are differences in flowers. We're not trying to take all of the roses and make them tulips, or, or we're not trying to take the hydrangeas and say, hey, nope, we don't want those. We've got to make sure everything looks the same, because then we wouldn't have a beautiful garden. So neurodiversity is about exploring and understanding that all brains are different.
I like that. I like when you said brain types. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's sometimes I'll say neurotype, but I just think it's kind of easier just to hear brain type. So, and that could be from anything from a brain type of Down syndrome, or it could be someone even with trauma. That's being neurodivergent. So yeah, autism, ADHD, and trying to come through the lens of how can we provide support while ensuring that we're not trying to change somebody.
I love that, because they're not wrong. They're just different.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah, absolutely.
Powerful.
And that right there is a resonating theme throughout the therapy that I provide, ensuring that the students know, like, hey, just because you're different doesn't mean it's wrong or bad. Remember, being different is okay. And that's really kind of that self-acceptance piece, or at least the self-awareness of, hey, I'm different. And now I got to accept that I'm different, but I also need to build on the tools so I can advocate to get my needs met.
Ah, beautiful. I love it. I love it. So as speech paths, we are always working on our craft. We're always trying to keep ourselves with the current trends and understand to be better, because when you know better, you're going to do better. And I know that there's, the old way of thinking and what we used to do, we can't. So we got to do that shift, which I hope today you are going to help us shift our thinking. But, we've got some listeners that might be going, well, are there, how, what, how? What do you think the challenges might be that an SLP might face? Do you want to tackle those?
Yeah, I mean, that first one, you nailed it right there. The biggest one right there is just shifting the mindset. That's like the biggest challenge, because sometimes we get stuck in this medical model of disability that emphasizes, that there are deficits that need to be fixed. And that ends up pushing a behavioral approach. And just over time, there's enough research out there that just says, hey, this approach isn't the most effective. And a lot of times what it can end up doing is it might seem like it works on the beginning phases, but then over the years, it ends up leading to more withdrawal for individuals, or more anxiety, or it pushes them more into their trauma responses like fight or flight, and it just ends up being harmful. So one of the challenges absolutely is on a large scale. How do we shift mindsets from the outdated way of thinking and looking at individuals as deficit, as a deficit-based lens? And how do we shift that mindset to a strengths-based approach? Because sometimes people will misinterpret what a strengths-based approach is. They'll say, well, if we're only looking at the strengths, then they're not going to qualify for services. But that's not what a strength-based approach is. A strength-based approach is saying, hey, look, we're going to talk about what your differences are, what your way of communicating style is, but while also addressing the things that are difficult. So then we can build an IEP and we can build goals to help that need. So let me give you an example. An example might be from a deficit-based lens. You might see something that will say the student perseverates on Super Mario Brothers and they obsess about it and they don't maintain eye contact and they are constantly running around the room and they are not staying on topic and they cannot engage in reciprocal communication or back and forth communication. Okay, so that type of language ends up creating goals that are exactly what I said, which is deficit based. So you're going to see a goal such as this student needs to engage in back and forth conversation. The student needs to maintain eye contact for X amount of seconds. This student needs to talk about interest beyond their obsession or stop perseverating. The student needs to stay on topic. And so those are the types of goals that are pushed. And what ends up happening is that we don't really see the change over the years. The kid gets more stressed out. They become more socially withdrawn because they're told, hey, you can't talk about and engage with talking about Super Mario Brother. And then now they're forced to make eye contact. So now their anxiety's through the roof. And they're like, I don't want to go to school. I just can't do this anymore. Or we see other things, such as the student running out of class, which is referred to as eloping, but basically it's just needs aren't getting met. So I think any of us would run out of the class if that was the case. Or we might see physical aggression, verbal aggression, because the needs aren't getting met. So they're being told because it comes from a deficit-based lens. Okay, so with all of that being said, the reframe might look something like this. Student connects with their peers when discussing their passions, such as Super Mario Brothers and Bluey. Student prefers to listen while not being forced to make eye contact. Student needs some movement breaks, and when they're allowed to make some movement breaks and have a fidget, that helps their body stay regulated so they can connect, they can engage in conversations, they can maintain attention for a little bit in class or whatever that might be. Student likes to talk about Super Mario Brothers, and sometimes they might go into detail. And they're doing this because they like to share the knowledge and the details and connect. It's their way of building friendships. Okay, so that changes everything, that language that I used right there, because now we're talking about who the student is coming from a strengths-based approach, but then I also discussed some accommodations and some things that they can have some help with, such as movement breaks, access to fidgets, having an accommodation IEP that says don't require eye contact, things such as a speech and language goal, connecting with conversation by integrating their special interest and being allowed to talk about Super Mario Brothers. Like all of that is the biggest game changer. Just right there. And so if we can get on a large scale people to understand, hey, we could talk about strengths while also providing the services of things that might be challenging for the student, and coming at it from a non-pathologizing lens, a non-deficit based lens, then I think that we'll be making some good progress for the health and well-being of our students. And that is always number one, prioritizing well-being and health, mental health.
I love that. I love when you talked about the medical approach or the medical model being like, this is a deficit, so we're going to fix it. But you're looking at the social model, which is what are their strengths? And how can we foster their ability to communicate using their strengths?
Absolutely.
Gorgeous. That's gorgeous right there.
And so So yes, and to shadow that, that's also another challenge is how do we, because of the deficit-based model and because of the DSM,
Mhm.
the assessments that we use to get information all come from a comparative lens because they're all normed on neurotypical students. So you'll get a pragmatic subtest or a social language development test type thing that asks questions to compare against their non-autistic peers. So you're already set up for failure with the assessment piece. So the thing about what we need to do is to shift the questions that we ask. And when we do that, we're able to get the right answers. So I'll give you a couple examples. This is kind of where that assessment tool that I created came from was, how do we ask the right questions? Because in life, our whole lives are built up of a series of questions and answers. You ask the right question, you're going to get the right answer. You ask the wrong question, no one's going to win.
Yeah.
Right? It's even though I wake up in the morning and I have an IEP, and I know there's going to be, historically, maybe it's had some contention. Maybe there's an advocate. I have two questions I can ask. I can either ask, okay, this meeting is going to suck. What are they going to say negative about me this time? Or what crappy thing is going to happen? Yeah. Or I can say, what is the parent's perspective or the advocate going to request for today? And maybe I can further explore so I can try to see everybody's perspective. So that way I'm going into the meeting without already feeling bitter or a grudge. So the question I ask myself prior to going is going to determine how my emotional state's going to be and how I'm going to connect with everybody. So the DASL, when I created that, when it comes to assessing students, we're not asking like, does the student turn take, or do they make eye contact, or do they use humor appropriately? Because that's all subjective anyway.
Yeah.
Or do they talk about age-appropriate conversations, or do they engage in reciprocal? All of the things that are on our checklist, we're getting away from those types of questions. The type of questions we want to ask are, in class, we want to connect maybe with the teacher of when the student gets stuck or is unclear, are they asking for help? How are they asking for help? Are they emailing you for clarification? When they're unclear on their directions, what does it look like for their ability to get their needs met? Are they connecting with their peers? And what does that look like that we can better help the students so they have a connection with small group? Like we ask the parents, when things are difficult, do they have some strategies to co-regulate? Do they come to you for some help? So we're getting just like the big picture of how we can best help the students by asking the right questions. And that really is the game changer. But the challenge is getting that information out to people so we can make those changes.
Yeah, I love that. I love the fact that you have the DASL. I was going to ask at the end, but I think those that are listening might want to know, what's the website for that?
You could just go to speechdude.com.
Okay.
Yeah, you know what is another really cool thing, because there's a couple other things that I have that can give some information, like a free webinar and things like that. But if you just go to my Instagram and then you inbox me the word bananas, that's all you have to do. So it's so you inbox me the word bananas and it'll send you down a path to meet my speech dude bot. And he's fun too. He's got some good humor. So that's always another option.
Well, I love it because, dynamic assessment is kind of the other little buzzword I hear a lot. And just being able to, when you're just saying, think about the questions you're asking, because you're right. Some of those tests that we're giving, they aren't normed on these kiddos. And it is so important to get that insight of exactly what you said. When they're in the classroom, if they don't understand, and then you're writing this up narratively of really the impact. So you're staying strength-based, right? But you're able to show the impact because this is how it's affecting in the classroom. Boom.
Yeah, absolutely. And dynamic assessment is valid for the assessment purposes. In the school setting, there's this law or this act, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. And within that, in section 300, 306, it states that we can use measures to assess to get the most accurate results. We use measures that yield the most accurate results. That's quote unquote what it says in the language. And it doesn't say that we have to use standardized assessments. Now, some districts might have policies where it's required, but the law, the big law at the top, IDA law, we don't have to use formal or standardized assessments if those assessment tools are not yielding the most accurate results. And if you really think about it, are they ever really yielding the most accurate results when you have a kid going who knows they're being tested? So now they're being like hyper vigilant, like, did I say the right thing? Did I not say the right thing? Did I answer right? Did I not? They're going usually with an examiner that they don't really know or they don't bond or connect with. So now their anxiety is through the roof. Research shows that when you have a lot of anxiety, you're not going to get the same output. There's only one way of giving your output, which is usually they have to listen to the prompt and then they have to have some working memory. Many of our kids have executive functioning difficulties, so it's hard for them to get some of those answers out. So you're absolutely not going to get the right or accurate results if we rely solely on standardized tests. So I think that's another really helpful thing. We have the law to help us. We just have to know how to access what sections of the law
and
to use. So we can
I wrote it down.
ourselves.
I may want to make sure I wrote it down right. IDEA, you said section 300.306.
0.306. Yeah, that's like the assessment section of IDEA.
Okay. For all of those out there, they're writing it down.
They're like, oh God, I love this. Yeah, no, that's actually the beauty. Like within my assessment, I have some sample reports. I include the law in my report, and the reason is because of the challenges that we just talked about. If people have a different mindset or people are looking and viewing things from the past, and my report doesn't reflect some of their views, I can stand on why I wrote what I wrote, and I have the law to prove it. So if it ever goes to due process or it ever goes to the administrative law judge, I could say, look, right here in IDEA law, I have some flexibility to do a dynamic assessment, to get information from the teachers and the family and the student. And I can do it from observations and from a lot of other varieties other than having to do formalized assessments.
Right.
Back myself up.
Yeah. And I mean, talk about getting the parents and students involved, Oh,
yeah. That's huge. Yeah. Because I know we'll probably get into that. But with that being said, that's always paramount to success. First, getting information from the parents and asking the right questions and building the trust.
Assessment. Yeah.
That's huge. Yeah, that trust piece is huge. I always think about back in 2001, 9/11. Prior to 9/11, we were able to go to the airport. I remember it. I would go on my college trips and I would have like a bottle of tequila. You would just go right onto the airport. Like it's not really like, TSA was like, here, let me wand you real quick. Go have some fun. But then 9/11 happened. And when 9/11 happened, it lost trust permanently. So the whole system changed from that day forward for all of us. It became really locked down and really strict, and as it should. But my point being, once you break trust, it's like next to impossible to get back. So I work at the high school level. Some of the parents might have had some things that have happened in the past, but my job as an SLP is to be an active listener. Like, where are you coming from? What are your struggles and concerns about your child? And then I'm here so I can best collaborate with you and establish that trust. Yeah, so that's number one. The number two is on the student end, which ties into intrinsic motivation. A lot of times IEP goals are written, and sometimes even outside of this of the school setting, but without asking the student, hey, is this something that you would like to work on? Like, there's so much research from Daniel Pink and from Alfie Kohn and from so many other people. Andrew Huberman has some of his stuff online about intrinsic motivation and the drive and that internal need for autonomy and that mastery and purpose. And if you really want to have some intrinsic motivation and get the goals to be successful, then the student has to have buy-in. That's the key. Like, hey, do you want to work on this goal? Or what are some of the things that are challenging for you? Let's create some goals that you're also in agreement with. So we all win.
I love that.
What I get.
So I love the fact that you're saying, really, you're getting everybody involved from the beginning, starting with assessment. This isn't just, oh, we're coming to you and telling you this is what's wrong. You're bringing the family, the students all in. So everyone has buy-in from the get-go. And now you're saying,
Right.
not only that, but let's talk about it in the goals. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the big piece there, getting everybody to have buy-in. Now, sometimes there will be resistance from maybe a team member. Maybe somebody has a different approach, right? It could be from like a behavioral approach. It could be the parent saying, look, I know that you want to work on these things, but I still want to work on my child blending in with their neurotypical peers, or whatever they want to call that. And then at that point, it's still collaborating. It's still having trust with the parents, but it's also, sometimes you can't do it necessarily in the meeting, but I'll say, yeah, you know what? I think we share some of the same concerns. Here are some articles or some research that I stand on with my approach. We can still do that, but here's how we're going to do it. So let me give you an example.
Yeah.
The parent says, my child, in order for them to be successful in the real world, it doesn't have to be the parent, it could be anybody. Well, we want them to learn social skills, because how are they going to succeed in the real world? They need a friend or several friends to have, so they're not lonely. And so we want to teach them, social skills. And so I say, okay, I want them to have the skills to where they're authentic, to where they're not having to fake who they are in conversations. So that will sustain some genuine friendships rather than fake friendships. And I want to also prioritize their well-being and their health. So here's what we're going to do. I think that if we can build on some of their interest, whatever your child is interested in, and we connect them with like-minded peers, I could create a small social group where conversations will happen naturally. We'll have a variety of activities. They'll get to learn a little bit about themselves, and they'll build friendship that is authentic. And that will serve a much greater purpose than teaching them to imitate their peers. Because a lot of times the curriculum, it's packaged to say, hey, look, we've got all of these video modeling social skills. Now, in isolation, watch these videos. Now, go out there and do what you watch in the video. And the thing is maybe they can do it, but it's not true or authentic to them. It's uncomfortable to them. And over time, again, I mentioned they become hypervigilant and then become even more socially withdrawn. So what ends up happening is that we'll have a parent that has a freshman, and they'll tell me, my child's been in social skills and working on this stuff for 6 years, and they still don't have a friend. They're still, and that's been our biggest challenge. And the whole reason is because the approach was wrong, because the kid was being taught to be someone they're not. That's not going to be the success of the outcome. They need to be taught that they might have some differences, that they'll connect with people who are similar to them. And we can do that through building, a foundation of social groups, not social skills training, but social groups of peers where they can blossom naturally. I think that's huge.
I just had this, when you said, you even gave me chills. When you said you're going to foster relationships with like-minded peers that build authentic relationships, and conversations will then develop. I'm dying right now because this is amazing, because I think about, because the parent says, I want them to have friends and have a conversation. As adults, if I find myself in a social situation and they are talking about something that I am not like-minded about, I know how to get myself out of it. I don't force myself to stay in that conversation. Wow.
Yeah, imagine being forced into it. So like you go to a wedding with your significant other. It's like their cousin's getting married and you got invited, and you get to the wedding, and the person that's checking you in, you go look at the big map of what table you're sitting at for dinner, and you're at table 8, and someone says, hey, I know that you're at table 8, but for this wedding, we're switching you to table 6 because you don't know any of their family members. You don't know any of their cousins. So we're going to remove you from everybody in all your comfort zone, put you over there. But you have to make sure that at that table of people that you've never met and that you have no interest in talking to, you're going to have to talk about things that you don't love talking about. So you're going to have to talk about, I don't know, something that people don't love talking about, whatever it is, right? And then you have to make eye contact, make sure you make eye contact. But then when you start talking about the thing that you don't love, you have to make sure that you have a conversation at least with 3 exchanges. You'd be like, I hate weddings, not going back with you. That sucks. You'd have more anxiety than when you went in the first place, right? So it's funny because we have these perceptions that if we give these kids those skills, they're just going to magically have some friends and then they're not going to be lonely. But it inadvertently does the opposite effect. We end up teaching kids to be somebody they're not and to go up to groups of peers that they don't really feel comfortable with, to talk about the things that they don't love, and then to monitor themselves like, did I follow up with a question or did I not? Did I add a thought to that or did I not? And they're like,
Chris, hold on a second. You just froze a second. So I got that, but I think that just, we'll back up that, you're talking about forcing a kid to go up to a group that they don't have an interest in themselves, to talk about something they have no interest in. That's right. Yeah.
To talk about things they have no interest in. And then for them, they're like, you know what? This is just causing me more stress than where I was at a year ago. And so there's just different ways about it. We just have to be able to try to put ourselves in, it's shifting our lens. Honestly, that's what it is. Like everything in life. Yeah. It's about, perspective. And if we can shift our lens to foster healthy connections, genuine conversations, I think that's a much better approach. I always think about that. That's kind of like my guiding rule on when it comes to an IEP goal or the way I write a report, or how I create a social group is this comfortable for the student? Is this something that the student wants? Is this prioritizing their mental health and well-being? Because if it's not, or if this is causing more dysregulation, or if this is causing more anxiety, or if this is causing more depression, that's just not the right approach. That's the kind of language I'll use too. If somebody, like, let's say I'm in an IEP meeting and they say, we got an outside evaluation, an IEE, and in the IEE, there's 3 goals that are recommended. We want those. And we want therapy 3 times a week.
Right.
The conversation then becomes, did we get input from the student? Do they want that? Do they want to be pulled that much? Second, the goals that are presented, is this teaching the student or the child to be inauthentic or to mimic? Is this like mimicking a neurotypical social skill? Because if so, there's a lot of research that says that this will just high masking leads to anxiety, depression, and much more severe things as the years go on. So that's the conversation I have. And I say, so I think we should be very cautious on those recommendations. And here are some of my recommendations that I feel prioritize the student's mental health and their well-being. And that will always be my stance. And I always try to get that message across to the families, to the parents. It's always a huge one. That's what they want.
I think if a parent hears that you are taking in account the mental health and their child's best interest, and sometimes there is that education part. When we're talking about IEPs, you want to kind of give us those, let's refresh those components. You kind of like, what are those 3 components for a strength-based IEP?
Yeah. So, okay. So as strength-based IEPs, one of the most important things on the IEP is going to be the present levels page.
Oh, okay.
Because those can be, I don't know if it varies from state. Present levels of performance.
We use that here too in Texas. Yeah.
I was going to say it's probably ubiquitous between all the states, and then PLOP, PLOP, right? So so the present levels of performance is such a huge piece, because in our assessments, in our observations, in our reports from teachers and parents, all of that we can kind of summarize and get it into that section of the IEP. Whatever that statement or whatever those statements are on the present levels of performance are what's going to drive the services and what's going to create the goals, right? So we always want to make sure that we do our best over time to learn what type of language that we are putting into the present levels of performance. And that's huge too, because that'll always be this section that is reflected if the meeting ever escalates to the next steps. It's like, hey, well, why did you create that goal? And it's like, well, let's go back, look in the reports and look at the present levels of performance. And so for a strengths-based IEP, what we're doing is we're trying to use the accommodation section to change the environment, not the student. So for example, rather than having a kid be in a classroom where there's always loud sounds going on, maybe they're next door to the band room, or maybe they're in their TV video class and there's a lot of projectors that make the loud squeaky noise, or maybe they're inside of a classroom that doesn't have any of the light covers, so the fluorescent lights are just really bright. If that's the sensory sensitivity that the students have, then incorporating the accommodation in the IEP would be a strengths-based way. So allowing the student access to noise canceling headphones, allowing the student access to an alternative setting when there's a big rally or an assembly where there's just too many people, too many bright lights, loud sounds, or it's confined with a lot of people. Allowing the student, and then some of the other more common things you might see, allowing the student to get a little extra time on something, or printed notes, or clarification on directions. Another really important one, I think, too, like a strengths-based approach, is if the student starts to feel overwhelmed or anxious because there's just too many executive functioning things going on. They were asked to, have to write something and then get into a group, and then they were having to do 3 other tasks, right? Whatever that might be. In the accommodations page, having access to one trusted person in every building, or having access to 2 trusted people on campus to help them co-regulate, having a place to go where they can get back to, all right, now I'm more regulated. And at that point, now I can learn. A child that's dysregulated or has a lot of anxiety constantly is not going to be in their optimal learning zone. So if we can embed those types of things in the IEP, then we'll really see some big changes in a positive way. But yeah, I really like to think out of the box on a strengths-based IEP is going to be changing the environment, not the student. A strengths-based IEP is going to be working and emphasizing one's ability to self-advocate for their needs and self-advocate. So let's say it's a non-speaking student that uses an AAC device. We want that student to be able to communicate when they're stressed, or when they have a headache, or when something like they have body aches, or we want that student to be able to request, like, hey, I need a short movement break, or I am feeling really nervous right now, or there's just too much work. Like, all students should be able to communicate when they have those feelings, because if they can't, then they're going to be dysregulated. And then it's going to, on the outside, seem like they're being defiant or they're being non-compliant, which just isn't the case. So sometimes you'll see, maybe you'll have a student that runs out of the classroom. Like, okay, so the idea here is not how do we keep the kid from eloping, or how do we keep the kid stay seated and then come in with a bunch of sticker charts or token systems, because that's not solving the why. We have to come in and say, instead of asking how do we keep the kid in the class or get them to do the work, we think about, why is this kid running? Why is this kid, having anxiety, or why is this kid having a hard time accessing this thing? And then we kind of, do the reverse engineering so we can come in with the right tools and strategies. And so that's kind of like coming from a strengths-based approach. Like strengths-based IEPs, you won't see sticker charts and tokens and things like that. What you will see is, support with self-advocacy, communication. You'll see all of those types of approaches
Mhm.
that are not really compliance based. They're more of strengths based.
Right. Okay. I'm going to go back to when you were talking about the environment, and I don't know why this popped in my head. Because if you wrote in in your PLAF, right, that the student has trouble with loud noises, okay, deficit. So then you wrote a goal that the child will acclimate to loud noises. So what you're gonna like do the I don't know why that jumped in my head, because sometimes I have to take it to the ridiculousness for people to realize how ridiculous it really is. We're not going to make a child go through this like desensitizing of I don't know. That just made me go, that kind of was another thing. Just if you can just look at it like that is ridiculous. We would never do that. So why
Oh,
are we doing that in other areas? Yeah.
yeah. Or like, it's not all too uncommon to see a chart printed out that will say, I am working for, and
Yes.
then it'll have like 5 things, but all of the things that they're working for are actually the things that are going to help them access regulation or the curriculum. So for example, it's like, I am working for, and then it'll say break or movement time. I'm like, that kid needs that right now. Like, they shouldn't have to work for that if that's what they need right now. Or I am working for noise canceling headphones, or my fidget, or my plushie. It's like, wait, those are actually the things that they shouldn't have to work for, because those are the things that are going to help them out. It's like, imagine you have to read 3 sentences, right? Mm-hmm. So you're like, okay, after you're done reading for every sentence you read, you're going to get a star. After 3 stars, we'll give you your reading glasses. It's like, wait, so I actually have to read in order to earn my reading glasses? Like, that's actually the thing that's going to help me read the sentences in the first place.
Oh my God.
Sometimes it's, sometimes you have to shift the perspective and use those analogies for it to really hit home and go, oh yeah, that's true.
I love that. That's exactly how I work. My thing was like, okay, I'm going to need you to communicate. And as soon as you communicate, I'm going to give you your device.
Right. Oh my gosh. Yes. And there's just like, even with the devices, there's so many misconceptions and myths on those things. But yeah, it's like, just
let's show it.
If we can
bring some humor to it. That's how I am too. Let's make it a little funny, because like, you're asking this, but it's kind of like this. So if you see it like this, don't you think that that's a little odd? Yeah. Like, we're going to anyway, I can go on and on, because I'm all about the humor on that. I love it.
I think that's what makes for a good IEP, like a good therapy session and a good IEP is you can bring in some humor. I'm always myself in the IEP meetings, because I feel like it's just who I am, but it's like, I know it's a meeting, and it's,
well, we can still be professional, but professional us. Absolutely.
Yeah. Professional us. I'm still going to be me.
Yeah. Yeah. Be the best me I can be. Well, you just,
that's it. Yeah.
Said the word therapy sessions. Let's get into that. I want to open your brain, and I want to take it all in. I know we don't have enough time for that, but lay it on us. Give us what you can give us.
Oh yeah, for therapy. Oh gosh. Yeah. So that's kind of where the concept of that activity book I created was thinking about, how can we get students to learn about who they are, and when they can become more self-aware. Okay. Then for all of us, right? So I'll give you an example. Some of our students don't even realize like they might have differences with sensory needs, right? They might not realize like not everybody is sensitive to loud sounds in the class, or bright lights, or someone chewing gum across the class, or whatever it might be, right? So we kind of explore those types of things. We explore different ways of communicating. Some people, sometimes it might be a little bit more challenging to use spoken language to verbal speech, right? And so being able to write it down, or text, or use a device to communicate might be more effective in certain moments. So we explore those types of things. We explore that the world is made up of different brain types, and we talk about strengths. So we explore special interest. Why do those matter? Why what are special interests, like areas of passion, and then why for a neurodivergent individual, why would that be important for others? And it would be things such as to be able to connect with others. It brings joy. It finds a piece of calm. It helps connect friendships with other people who might share that similar special interest. There's a lot of reasons for it. So we really dive into those types of things. We, in a therapy session, I'll kind of put out a variety of activities that will shadow these types of concepts. Sometimes they might be electronic. So I have like a video game console in my office.
So cool.
And it's really cool. Yeah, because we'll get some opportunities to just make it fun. Puzzles, doodling, comics. In the video game one, I'll have students play like, I'll give them, a few games of playing Mario Kart. And the kids who you would see on an IEP that would say they're very shy, they don't communicate with others, socially withdrawn, lonely, doesn't make friends, is the same kid that you put on Mario Kart with another kid who absolutely loves Super Mario. And then they're like, hey, have you ever played Super Smash Brothers Brawl? Yeah, I have. What character? And then now they're talking about that. And they're like, hey, do you by chance have Discord? Because I'm in this group with some other people. And like all of a sudden you got a friendship and you're like, wait, this IEP is not reflective of who that kid is. All they needed was to find the right person. They needed to find their people. They needed to find their community. And so that's kind of what I feel like the role is, from what used to be the role years ago to now, which is it used to be a fixer. Now we're a facilitator. So we just kind of shift the language, and I facilitate language expression, social communication, and connection authentically and naturally. I help, bridge that gap between acquaintances and what are friends, what makes a true friend, and then how can we have those friendships that are sustainable? How do we build self-advocacy skills so needs are getting met in class? How do we identify the perspectives of others, and not saying that their perspective is wrong, but how do we give them insight so they can navigate the complex social world? Yeah, so there's a lot of things. And that's kind of, that activity book I mentioned, it really hits home on understanding oneself. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the staircase, right? It's even for us as we become adults and we're on social media and we connect with accounts, and then we're like, oh my gosh, that might have been how I reacted, is based on trauma because of this. And like, oh, I love following this account. Mm-hmm. And then we learn more about ourselves, and then we learn about, oh my gosh, if I validate my partner here, that's going to make everything better. So we're constantly learning. The more we learn about ourselves and become more self-aware, the more confidence we can have in asking for help. So self-awareness about our differences, about our challenges, about our strengths. And then we go to the next step, which is it builds our self-esteem and confidence, because now we know that we're not a broken neurotypical. We just know that we have differences. I think that sometimes our kids feel like, I'm so different than all my peers and I don't know why. There's something wrong with me. And that type of thought turns into a lower self-esteem. Like, there's something wrong with me. All these people magically pop into groups and socialize, and I can't do it. And I've tried, I'm broken. And that leads to low self-esteem. And low self-esteem leads to not asking for getting your needs met. So we flip the script and we build self-awareness, and we step to self-confidence and self-esteem. And then the last step is self-advocacy in all settings. So that's really the skills that I really like to help build. And so, like in a session, we'll even explore like going to the dentist office, and we'll talk about that. Like, hey, so what are some of the things that you, and as a group, I'll say, share with me one or two things that you don't really love about going to the dentist. And I'll say, well, you know what I hate when I go to the dentist is there's this really big bright light, and I just hate that. And we're okay, let's write down some more. I hate having to talk to the receptionist when we get there. Okay. I hate the loud drilling of the whatever's going in my mouth. Okay. I hate how they always show the same cartoon on the TV. So we'll list all these things. Okay, now what are some things we can do to meet some of these needs? And then we'll talk about the loud drilling. Well, do you think maybe we can talk to the dental assistant, or in advance we can write message them on Yelp, or we can email them from the website to say, would it be okay if I wear my noise canceling headphones during, my dental work? Is it okay if I wear my shaded glasses so I don't have to see the bright light? Is it okay if I change the channel instead of it being on the same one? Is it okay, rather than having to verbally speak to the receptionist, if I can just do this through writing on the app or writing it down? So constantly working on daily life skills that get their needs met.
Wow,
and so much fun.
That's a forever skill. Talk about being.
It is.
I mean, everyone has to go to the dentist. So let's talk about something that's in their life right now. Get your needs met and be able to generalize that. How would you then do that if you're going somewhere else? What would you need to do to ensure? Wow.
Yeah, and it's constantly sharpening the blade and then just practicing and trying and doing our best to get better at it. It's funny because I talk about all this stuff and then I catch myself, in my own situations where I'm not always advocating for many reasons. So like I'll be at a, Outback Steakhouse and I'll ask for like a medium rare steak and it'll come out like medium well. And then I'm like, shoot, this is going to taste horrible because that's not what I asked for. But I don't want to ask them if they can take it back and give me a new one because now I feel bad about that. And I'm like, but I teach self-advocacy skills and this would be me advocating. And then sometimes I catch myself not doing it. So there's only so much we can do.
But that's also good to bring it into the therapy. Like, sometimes I do this too, and I didn't ask for that. Yeah.
Yeah. But, and it's funny is learning about myself and learning about like the trauma response fawning. I'm a people pleaser. So I always catch myself saying yes. But the more I can become more self-aware of that, the more I can say, you know what? Sometimes just say no. And then that'll help your mental health. And so I'm constantly like, even in my own life, and it'll always be evolving for all of us, but like my students are actually helping me. And then like, it's kind of, it works hand in hand. I'm like, all right, I just told my students this. Now I got to go do this. Here we go.
Yeah, I need some help with, I come from a place of yes, more specifically, oh, hell yeah. Before that, yes is always my answer to everything. I find a yes to every request, and I need to slow my roll and learn that it is okay to say no. It is okay.
Yeah, especially like at the school setting, because it's like, hey, Chris, we have an IEP meeting that I didn't tell you about. It's in 5 minutes. Do you think you could write a report and be there in 5 minutes? I'm like, yeah. Dang it, I just said yeah. I should have said I need to learn to say no when a no should be a no and a yes should be a yes. That's it. That's life right there.
Agreed. And right. And sometimes I'm going to tell you a quick story about how when I'm not self-aware and my daughter was, my daughter and I were going, this is a few years because she's graduated now from college, and we were going to her college, I don't know, beginning. And right before we open the door into the Coliseum or auditorium, we're going in, she turns around, she goes, "You're going to hate this, but you're going to be okay." My daughter says this to me because she knows I get overwhelmed by large groups and large noises. And
oh my gosh.
Go, wow, that she really understood me. I did not like it.
She knew.
But I did it. I did it.
I love that. That's awesome. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that piece, reflecting back on what I just mentioned, is such a huge piece right there. It's like just identifying it. Like in that moment, should I have said no? Because I said yes. Should I have said no? And then I reflect back and I go, yeah, I should have. Okay, now that I at least can pinpoint it, now I can try to improve that for next time. At least give myself a little bit of time to process it before I rapidly say yes or no. Yeah, but all of those types of skills can ring true for our kids too.
But what I'm hearing, so you're setting your IEP up to reflect that we are working on self-awareness, which would then build self-confidence and self-esteem. And then ultimately, everybody's goal is for everyone to have self-advocacy. How could anybody fight that? I mean,
right. I think that's how you can live a harmonious life but then there's like the other kicker is that when you self-advocate for your needs, that it's reciprocal. And that's where the educational piece comes into. So you might have, like, hypothetically, a teacher where a student says, it really helps me if I can get those notes printed out and to wear noise canceling headphones. And the teacher says, no, I can't do that for you because it's not fair to everybody else. Right. That could happen. We hear that sometimes. So it's a matter of also the educational piece, back to what we were talking about earlier, shifting perspectives. So like in an IEP, if there's, staff members and teachers there, I'll always emphasize. And sometimes that's why I try to build trust with the teachers that I work with and on our campus. It's a safe place to where I'll go personally talk to a teacher and say, hey, this student can tend to struggle here. If you can provide this accommodation, you're going to see all of these other areas blossom as well. So they don't realize, like, by giving the student the accommodation, that student's going to be the best version of themselves in all areas. And they're not going to see any kind of behavioral challenges that they may have seen previously. And it's like literally everybody wins with that type of thinking. So that's the hopes, like, for the future, is less compliance based, more understanding other people's needs. When people have accommodations that are needed, then giving it to them, and providing some autonomy and some agency to help build self-determination. And I really think that's like the hopes for helping the mental health and well-being of all.
That's beautiful. I mean, I love that. And
that's it right there. That we'll write that one down.
We got to write that. We have it recorded. We're going to write it down. That's a mantra. That's what we need to do. I love what you said about the why. Not only understanding the why that the child is doing something, but the why for the teacher to understand why, if you do this, this is going to happen. Like, positively. Very nice. Because when people really understand the why behind something, they're going to do it with fidelity. Hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. I always think that, you just kind of lean into it a little bit and say, okay, here, I could provide that. And then it'll be much better, much easier, much healthier.
Right.
I've even had to do that like, it's funny because all of these things that I talk about are also strategies and concepts that I use in my household. So, with my children, it's the same type of thing. I'm like, okay, should I resist this and not provide that? And let's see how that goes. Or should I, kind of be flexible here and provide that so other things can get done. It was funny because that just happened a couple nights ago with my 3-year-old. It was like, it was getting kind of late and it's time for him to brush his teeth, but then he snagged the iPad and he was watching Spidey and the Amazing Friends. He loved that show. I'm all right, Jack, it's time to brush our teeth. And it was like, came with like a big resistance. I'm all, buddy, how about this? You brush your teeth, I'll come help you out. Then you can brush daddy's teeth and then I'll give you a couple more minutes. And it was like, it was too far, too late. Like he was like, no. Oh. So it's just like, okay, well, here we go. Let's just lean into this. Hey, buddy, I want you to watch Spidey and His Amazing Friends. So let's go watch. And so I carried it as he's watching it. I just carried it and I sat there and I got his toothbrush out. I'm all right, here you go. So he's like brushing his teeth while watching Spidey and the Amazing Friends. I'm all, that worked. I just leaned into it a little bit and then everybody wins. Yeah. And then to get that thing turned off, though, that was challenging.
Right. Yeah.
A whole nother level. But hey, you know what? Parenting and speech pathologizing and all of the things that we do, it's kind of figuring out what seems to work and help get needs met. Everybody. How do we want
everybody to win? I love it. I want to make sure that everybody listening will go to your website, which is www.speechdude.com. If you haven't been there, go there. There's so much stuff. Look at Chris, you've got great assessment tools. I love it. I love your website. I love the fact that you came and spoke on my podcast. I am like geeking out. I love it.
Awesome.
This has been fantastic. I hope that you enjoyed yourself too, and that you would consider maybe coming back again, because you've got such a wealth and breadth of knowledge on this. I love it.
Yeah, this is my area of passion. So in
Yeah.
the future, yeah, we'll connect. But I had a great time. Thank you so much for having me on as a guest. I am really hoping that's the future too, is to shift mindsets and make change. So the world can continue spinning in a good direction. We could add to it. We'll make the shift, make the change, and everybody wins.
There you go. Make the shift, make the change. Everybody wins. That's what we want you to leave knowing. Shift, change,
Yes.
win. Love it.
That's right.
All right. All right. Thank you.
Thanks
Bye,
so much.
everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on today's podcast. Remember to go to speechtherapypd.com to learn more about earning ASHA CEUs. We appreciate your positive reviews and support and would love for you to write a quick review and subscribe. If you have indicated that you are part of the ASHA registry and entered both your ASHA number and a complete address in your account profile prior to the course completion, we will submit earned CEUs to ASHA. Please allow 1 to 2 months from the completion date for your CEUs to be reflected on your ASHA transcript. For our School of Speech listeners, we have a special coupon code to receive $20 off any annual subscription to speechtherapypd.com. Head over there to get ASHA CEUs for listening to this podcast and all other episodes. The code is SCHOOL20. That is SCHOOL20. Hope to see you on our next episode. Also, please don't hesitate to tell us which topics you would like us to cover in future episodes. To get in touch, drop us a line in the comment section or send us a message on social media.